I no longer start with the physical part. I start talking them through, the fear. Tell me how you're feeling, because I can usually see it or sense it in them. Oh, I'm afraid this is never going to get better. I'm afraid this is the way it is. And I can really relate to that now after this experience I've had for the last 2 years. I understand the fear behind these injuries. What if it doesn't get better?
We start getting pain. It's like, oh, it'll just go away. And we just kind of let it go and it never goes away. And then we just start, rather than going to get help for it, we just start avoiding those movements.
Hmm.
And long term, what happens when we do that is the body learns this movement. We'll go with shoulder, we'll go with reaching overhead. That should be normal, used to be normal. The body's now like, oh, that's not safe. So that's when we kind of get stuck in this pain cycle of, well, I've avoided it for so long. Now that I'm getting it back because I've gone to therapy or I am going to therapy or been working on my own or whatever. We're getting it back, but it still hurts because the body has now learned this is a bad movement. It's a dangerous movement.
Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Hey, health junkies. On this episode of the Health Fix podcast, I have a trio going on. I've got Sue Markovitch, who's a specialized personal trainer for women over 40, and Brianne Showman. She's a doctor of physical therapy, and they are a fun bunch because the two of them are actually working together. So Dr. Brianne Showman is the doctor of physical therapy for Sue Markovitch, and they're working on rehabbing her hip. So I thought it'd be really fun to bring them on and chat about how Sue's hip replacement led her to Dr. Brianne Showman and how they're working together. But not only that, we're going to talk about all things fitness and how sweating plays into the game. We're going to talk about post-workout soreness. We're going to talk about fear around pain. We're going to talk about what if things don't get better? What do we do? We're going to talk about supplements. We're going to talk about electrolytes. We're also going to get into how the body remembers incidents from the past. We're going to talk about how important it is to research your care team, especially if you're going to have surgery and you're thinking about not only the doctor that's doing the surgery, but who's going to get you ready for it and who's going to rehab you after it. So many things here that are nuggets for anyone over 40 who's wanting to stay fit for life, but not only that, thinking about how to manage injuries, and maybe you're looking at some kind of surgery. This podcast is for you because you're going to hear a real life perspective from the three of us. All right, let's reintroduce you to Sue and Dr. Brianne Showman because they've both been on my podcast before. I guarantee you're going to like this one. It's a fun one. I love chatting with ladies like this. All right, let's get on with the podcast. Hey, health junkies. I have another trio podcast on today. And today I've got Sue Markovitch and I've got Dr. Brianne Showman on. And we're going to be talking about injuries and what to be thinking about to, one, prevent them, and two, if you have one, what to do over 40 because things change. I bet both of these ladies are going to tell us a little bit of what changes in the body as we get injured over 40. So let's have them introduce themselves to you. And since I have you guys screen configured where Sue's up here on the top, let's have Sue go first.
Hi, I'm Sue Markovitch. I'm a personal trainer for women over 40, and I am currently injured and rehabilitating. So that's kind of my current situation.
Awesome. Good. It's going to be good feedback for us today to learn a little bit more and your experience too, because that's really what I want folks to hear. Now, Brianne, tell us where you're at, what you're doing, and give folks the scoop of how the two of you are connected here.
Yeah, I'm Brianne Showman. I am a physical therapist in Arizona, and I am actually Sue's therapist for the injury she is rehabbing.
Which is fun because I love to have therapist and client on because now we can get both stories. Plus, for a lot of people, we only hear the one side of the story where, like, us docs are talking about, I have this client who had this experience, and it's just one-sided. So I figured we'll bring all of us together because, gosh, injuries, they're so common. I'm seeing more and more women, especially as estrogen declines. We're rolling ankles, shoulders are getting frozen, and in Sue's case, we've got a hip. So, Sue, tell us what happened with the hip? Like, how did this play out?
Well, I was hiking all over Arizona and I started having this hip pain anterior, so front of my hip and kind of down the front of the leg. And so I started, the process, start to maybe see an ortho. I tried some PT. I did some dry needling. I just sort of threw everything at it that I could think of. And I was 57 at the time, and it was really hard to hear that this is arthritis, you're bone on bone, and you're going to need a hip replacement. But that's really where I was. But I wanted to make sure I got everything I could done before I went into surgery.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so it's just osteoarthritis. I'm almost 20 years post-menopause, so no estrogen. And the problem started when I went in for the surgery and they fractured my greater trochanter accidentally during the surgery.
Oof.
So that was 2 years ago this month. So
Oh,
that's what happened.
man. Did you know if you had low bone density before going
I
into the
knew that I
surgery?
did not. I've had my bone density scan done. I have normal hip density, had it tested, especially since I was, went through menopause so early. So it was nothing to do with me. It was just a small percentage chance complication, and it happened to me.
Oh, man.
Accidental.
Man. Bree, do you hear that like, do you see a lot of folks who have had that happen?
No, Sue's actually the first one that I worked with it.
Yeah. Oh
It's
my
very
gosh.
rare.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I am so sorry. That sucks. That sucks. I think a lot of people, as we get older, we start to realize that things are bone on bone, knees, hips, and it sometimes gets to the point where we do have that decision to make. Like, do we go for a replacement? Do we not? What can I ask you kind of what was going through your mind when you're like, do I do this? Do I not? Because I think a lot of people can benefit from hearing because you were so active, what went through your mind thinking this through as to like, do I make this decision? Do I not?
Well, surgery is a big decision. That's why I wanted to go through some steps before I got there. I was familiar with some of the modalities already. I just thought I'm going to try some things, make sure this isn't just some sort of radical imbalance that's going on in there, pulling my joint out of alignment. And I would go in and it would feel so much better, but by the next day it was right back to that bone on bone pain. So after several months of that, it started to sink in a little more like, okay, I need the surgery. Now let's, go through that process, find a surgeon, get things set up, and do it that way. I actually didn't have a lot of fear before that first surgery. I just thought, all right, I'm healthy, I'm fit, let's do this. Everybody says hips are the easiest one. I'll be back up to what I'm doing in 6 weeks. No problem. Let's go.
So this is the part where I go, all right, Bree, tell us what you've seen on your end because it's true. You hear the stories, like same with me. I've seen a couple of my folks, they've had the hip replacement and then like they're up and walking, they're good to go, minor recovery and boom, they're back out. And then there are a couple of folks that I've seen where not so great. So, Bree, give us a scoop on like the hips and what you've seen over the years in terms of us 40 years and older and kind of how people have fared and how you help folks make a decision too, because I know obviously you're in that position as well sometimes.
Yeah, as far as hips go, they aren't, I'll say it's probably the least frequently seen joint with pain. A lot of knees, a lot of shoulders, a lot of backs, that sort of thing. With that said, a lot of hip immobility and tightness and weakness and all the things create a lot of our low back pain, create a lot of our knee pain. And so typically when I'm seeing anyone for a knee or low back, I'm assessing the hips and I'm seeing really tight hips, I'm seeing really weak hips. And so it's an area that we don't necessarily get a lot of pain in as frequently as some of our other joints, but we tend to have a lot of issues there without us realizing it that are creating a lot of our other pains.
Great comment, because I definitely will see that too when I do a little bit of mobility assessments on my folks. Just having someone try to do a squat or try to do a lunge or just swinging the leg can be, just like, whoa, okay. Do you think, and Sue, this isn't meant to like make things sound like, oh, she didn't stretch or do her, mobility work. It's not like that. Do you think that a lot of people could avoid trouble with the hip if they do work on the mobility? aspect of the hip. What's your opinion?
I think so. I mean, like you said, Sue was probably doing all the things, and so
Yeah.
not everyone is 100% going to prevent a lot of things. But I think so. Even just seeing like myself included, but a lot of patients, myself, just working on hip mobility can totally clear up knee pain and things like that. And so a lot of times just starting to work on that mobility can clear up a lot of things that we don't realize is, that it's impacting it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see Sue nodding. So she's like, yeah, I kind of, what did, like, if we go back to you for a second, Sue, like when you were hiking, when, it's not like our age range, like any of us, 40 plus, we weren't, there was stretch, 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 but we didn't really learn about mobility. I don't think they started really talking about it for about maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15, 10 years ago, so it wasn't really a thing. Were you doing any mobility work at all, Sue, with your situation? Did you know to do it? Did you start at a certain age and then just was too late? What do you think?
I feel like, well, before I was a hiker, I was a runner.
Okay.
And I'm not sure I was an excellent form runner. I just really loved it. And I ended up doing long distance running, done 9 marathons, I've done 35 halves, you know. And I can guarantee you, I wasn't doing hip strengthening exercises for like glute med and things like that the way I should have to support that kind of running. I just didn't understand that fully at the time. Also, hip mobility and things like that started to come into the fitness world right around the middle of my running. So if I was doing damage to my hips, I'd already done it. I just think it was a bit of a combination for me, but I'm sure that I wasn't consciously doing the things I needed to do to support my hip strength through all that running.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's super common, and especially our age ranges. Like, we just weren't taught that. And a lot of people, are still stuck on, oh, I just need to stretch more, but my hamstrings just never loosen up, kind of a thing. I'm sure Bree hears this all the time, you know? And then the other side of it too, and I don't know if you experienced this too, and Bree, I'm sure you can talk about it because you love working on those feet. Plantar fasciitis. I see it so often. And then I go up and poke on the hips and see the strength of the hips, and it's weak and excessively tight.
Mhm.
Let's hear your take on that, Brie. I want to hear about it.
Yes, there's a lot of interplay between the hip and the foot and ankle. Typically, if one isn't working right, the other one's not going to work right, and it works both directions. So if that foot's super weak, we're not going to get proper glute activation. If we're not getting good glute activation, we aren't going to have the good foot control. So they do work together and kind of back and forth. Um, but just kind of thinking mechanically, in order to kind of keep our foot into a good arch position, we need that glute med, glute max to activate. In order to get ourselves in order to get into our toe off position, which is going to activate our glutes better, we need that hip extension. So we don't have our hip extension, naturally, we aren't going to get those glutes firing like they need to. To piggyback on that, if our foot is collapsing in because we don't have good control of it, we aren't going to get the glute activation that we intend to when we're doing any sort of single leg activity, including running or any of your like single leg RDL, single leg balance, all your single leg things. So there is such an interaction, correlation, co-contraction between those two areas that we really do need to address, both of them simultaneously. And so it is pretty common for us to find really weak hips um, with weak feet, and also just kind of go into, because I know you hear a lot of people talk about, especially in social media world, is like glute amnesia and that sort of thing. In my opinion, it's more of you're not like you can put someone on the table, measure hip strength, it can be great. You put them standing and they don't know what to do. It's the body not knowing mechanically how to use it properly. It's not the fact that it does know to fire. If they lay on their back, they can do a glute set, their glutes will fire. It's fine. It's a matter of getting that foot in a position and training the body how to actually fire those glutes when they're being used.
So key. So key. And I think a lot of people don't think about that like we're feeling our world through our feet.
Mhm.
And if we don't know how to move from there, that's a biggie. And so many cues over the years just from weightlifting. And I'm sure you've had that too, where you're like, oh my gosh, my one foot's doing this, my other one's doing that. So Sue, in being a trainer, I'm curious with working with your clients now that you've had Bree kind of working with you and you kind of learning, the fitness realm of things. Are you catching a lot of folks in their mobility, kind of doing a little bit of interesting things with their feet or balance or even just watching the hips? Are you seeing a lot of stuff coming up for folks?
Yes, especially as my clientele age. So, yeah. Um, as I learn things through my own injury and clients' injuries, I actually then try to build those physical therapy ideas into my workouts. So one of the first things I learned was actually with upper body, that upper cross, where the shoulders are rounded forward, the pecs are tight. So I thought, you know what, we're not going to work as many pecs. We don't need that. Let's really focus on rows, 3 times as many rows as anything else. And I just started building it in and explaining to people, we're just trying to maintain that posture. Now that I understand the hips so much better, I'm trying to do the same. So everyone's doing their clamshells and, things like that, just as preventative and to strengthen up those hips. We've always done a lot of balance, something everyone asks for, balance, posture, just the things that you start to feel like you're losing as you age or that are causing you problems or pain as you age. Those are often what are asked for in personal training.
Have you seen that too, Brie? Like people are asking for balance, posture, that kind of stuff as they get older too, or are you having to kind of wrestle that out of them? Because I'm imagining sometimes we have different clientele because with PT we've got folks that sometimes have injuries, but for you, Sue, folks are looking to improve their life, and so I'm curious, like what's the differential between the two
Yeah.
industries? Because I know a lot of people just go to PT because they still have it stuck in their head that their hip's not connected to their knee, connected to their foot. Like somehow that Bojangles song did not click.
I would say, like, I think Sue and other trainers get the I need help, and I get the I don't know what's wrong with me. Because typically when we're getting shoulder, neck, upper back, low back, all those things, it's education on posture and why that's important, why the core is important. And um like balance wise, a lot of times people are just like, oh, my balance is just bad. Like, not I need to work on it, not anything like that. It's just my balance isn't good on either foot. I'm like, all right, well, let's do something about that. So it's really interesting, my perspective, because most people, it's like their balance is crappy. They don't real like they know it's crappy, but they don't know they need to do anything about it.
Great. Oh my gosh, as you bring that up, I think about balance. I also think about like my main reason, like if people were to really ask me and like nail it down like to the nitty-gritty of why I lift weights, why I stay fit. Literally, so if I'm traveling and I end up in a place like rural Turkey, this happened to me when I was a teenager, rural Turkey, the bathrooms off the highway are stalls with holes in the ground. And like I literally thought, I looked at my friend and said, did they take the toilets out? Like, is this a broken bathroom? She's like, no, this is a bathroom. I'm like, God. But it hit me ever since then. I'm like, I asked her, I'm like, what do older women do who can't squat over a hole? She said, I have no clue. I have no clue what they do. And I'm like, if I'm traveling, if I'm going to be traveling, I need to have this ability. Because could you imagine if you can't balance? Maybe your glute muscles and your hamstring and your quads and your whole legs are not very strong, and you can't balance, and you got to try to get over a hole. You don't want to fall in what's down there. What do you do? So, for me, that was like a big, and I was like probably 17 at the time, and I was like, I will never lose my glute strength ever. So I'm curious about the two of you. Did you ever hit a point, and feel free, whoever wants to speak up first, ever hit a point where you're like, this is why I do this? Maybe you saw a client, maybe you had an experience. I'm super curious if you guys have stories as you're like, I need to be super strong. Get me.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's kind of all the things. Like I've had patients tell me those stories, and they were the people who couldn't like and had to. Luckily, there was bars I could hold them up and that sort of thing. Um, I think for me too, it's just like I compete as a masters athlete. I judge masters. I'm like I see people 65 plus 70 who are full depth squatting, no issues, and then I go back to work the next day and have a 6-year-old patient who can't stand up from a chair by themselves, without using their hands, or just can't even get to like even 90 degrees if they do a squat. And for me, just seeing that dichotomy of it, and I'm like, I don't ever want to be that person who can't get up and down from the floor if I choose to. Like, I'm sitting on the floor right now. I love sitting on the floor. Um, so I'm like, for me, it's more just overall function. I never want to get to a point where it's like, I can't get up and down from the floor if I need to or want to, or I can't climb up a ladder I'm short. I need to be able to climb on step stools without falling. Um,
Climbing on counters, that's
things like that,
important.
climb on counter. So, for me, it's a lot of that is I want to be able to, and granted, like traumas happen that can impact things, but as long as I can control it, like I want to be able to do what I want to do as long as I want to do it.
Hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense. What about you, Sue?
Well, I hear a lot of that from clients. I want to be able to maintain and keep doing the things that I want to be doing. For me personally, I was an unfit, overweight smoker until I was 40. So exercise was not in my world. And then I made a change, kind of fell in love with strength training, uh, fell in love with the life of fitness, and I felt so much better about myself. So it's not just the physical component for me, it's the mind, body, spirit component. I'm a different person because of those changes I made, quitting smoking, then losing the weight, getting outside, and doing that cardio and stuff like that. So uh, even when I go through periods where I am not maintaining things very well, I remember my reason. You feel better about yourself when you're doing it. So that's my why.
Yeah. So important because I think a lot of people will get stuck in the I do fitness because I'm going to lose weight. That's not fun. I mean, really, at the
It's
end of
not
the
fun.
day, it's so not fun. But I also think, part of course, why I wanted both of you to come on is really to share, like, okay, these kind of things, we need to be thinking about subtle signs where the body might need a little tweak. Because even I'm sure Bree notices little tweaks. Sue, I'm sure you notice little things that are shifting as you get older, little things that need to be maintained. So I'm curious from the two of you, what kind of things have you noticed as you've gotten older that needed attention? Just things that you could, just work on and have fun with working on.
For me, it's for past injuries showing up other ways. And what's pretty common is, and that's why I always ask patients history of injuries, not even necessarily what's going on, is because typically 10, 15 years later is when things start showing up. So that car accident, that wasn't too bad, that ankle sprain, that whatever, 10, 15 years later, we start getting other issues from it. So for me, I had a bad ankle sprain when I was in PT school, required surgery, and now I'm having my tib fib joints, so two short long bones or two long bones of our lower leg. The one by my knee, that one is becoming hypermobile now because of laxity that happened in that joint that I didn't realize when I sprained the ankle before. So like for me, it's a lot of knee stuff now that's kind of popped up from compensations my body was making for quite a few years from the ankle and everything there.
Okay. What about you, Sue?
All the compensations, right? So many compensations. I think for me, I started seeing the huge benefits of a strong core. So the more I work my core properly, the better I feel, and everything else. It seems to help all the other things that were going on. And that's been key for me too in my rehabilitation is getting back some of my core strength. Because after you've had a surgery and you're non-weight bearing, you start to lose a lot of it. And it makes a difference right away on how your neck feels, your shoulder feels, your lower back feels, your knees, everything. And I just kept telling myself, you'll be able to do your core work again very soon. Just, hang in there. And I really believed that this peripheral pain was going to go away as soon as I found that kind of center strength, and it has.
That's huge to hear because I think so many people, we go into surgeries and we're like, is this really going to work? Right? We've heard the horror stories, especially with back pain and back surgeries and stuff. And those are a whole nother, that's a 3-part podcast for back pain. But, when it comes to hip, when it comes to knee, a lot of my clients will come in and be like, okay, I think I'm going to do this surgery. I'm really afraid of what it's going to be like afterwards. A mobility is a biggie, especially with the knee, and ankles, and typically I don't have too many ankle surgeries. That's more knee replacements and hip replacements this day and age. And then shoulders. We're going to talk about shoulders here in a minute because I do think it's fun. It's fun to talk about them. Um, but I see it commonly happening though, where people will go into things going, I don't know how this is going to work out for me. And I'm like, have you been strengthening ahead of time? So I would love to hear both of your opinions. Like, what did you do, Sue, like before you went into that hip surgery? And were you guys working together at that time?
No,
Okay.
I didn't meet Bree till recently.
Okay.
My surgery was 2 years ago when I had the fracture. I was non-weight bearing for months. Then I had a PT through the surgeon's office, went with them. Then I had to have my other hip done. In the
Oh.
meantime, this fracture displaced. So this year in September, I had the fracture repaired. So this is my third surgery, and I wanted a whole different team and a whole different mentality. So I found this female orthopedic surgeon that's a hip fracture specialist, and she ended up being amazing and empathetic and all that you're looking for in a surgeon. And then I wanted to find a physical therapist with those same qualities, with a lot of experience, um, that was close by and all of that. But I really did a lot of research for my team, and it's amazing that my preparation was, yes, all the physical therapy that I did to get ready for like this past surgery, which I did. I strengthened as much as I could, knowing I'd be non-weight bearing again. I just got my muscles back, and then you're going to lose them again. But like the positivity and the experience of working with Brie and her company has helped me mentally immensely. And comparing it to the first time around, it's amazing the difference. You have to find the right people.
So huge. So huge. I'm guessing, Brie, you've worked obviously with a lot of people pre and post surgery. And in terms of like just in general, give us a little scoop of like what you work with for your folks when you're looking going into surgery and what it looks like coming out. Like how does that look? What should and basically from the perspective of folks looking for a good team and a good provider. And of course, we'll tell folks where you're at too. She's in Arizona. Um, but we'll let you guys tell where you're at so that you can hear the scoop there. But um, yeah, tell us what's the pre and post kind of protocol people should be. I don't want to say should, but like something to look for, like ballpark to make sure that you're finding someone that is well versed in knowing how to get you dialed in before and help you on the way out.
Yeah, the biggest thing when you're going pre-surgery, whether you're working with someone in a physical therapy setting, trainer setting, or just on your own, is the stronger you go into surgery, the stronger you come out of surgery. Obviously, muscles are being cut, you may be non-weight bearing, so things are going to happen. But the bigger muscle mass you have going into it, the less, like, I guess ratio wise, the less you're going to lose type thing. Um, which typically will make your recovery so much better and so much faster if you have that muscle going into it. After surgery, typically, initially, we're just working on range of motion because obviously, if you don't get range of motion back, nothing else is going to function right. But in the grand scheme of things, we're working range of motion. We're working usually in the beginning, very isolated strength. And then from there, we're getting to functional strength. Um, and obviously, everyone's function is going to be a little bit different, but I'm always going to train stairs because even if you don't have stairs, you have curbs to go up and down in the world. Or ideally, you have curbs to go up and down. Don't use those ramps all the time. Um,
Use the
make
stairs too. Don't take the elevator.
yeah, exactly,
Public
exactly.
service announcement.
There we go. Um, always retraining mechanics, so making sure someone's walking properly. Um, And the walking properly takes a long time to come back because typically, if someone has been, especially like knee replacements, they're usually in pain for a while. Gait mechanics are changing because it's not bending as much. There's problems. So getting those gait mechanics back after surgery can sometimes be the biggest battle because we're breaking bad habits to retrain proper habits again. So sometimes that's the longest process. but then making sure we clean up those compensations. So like going to a single leg RDL. I'm usually working on those with everyone for lower extremity. They're great for balance, they're great for strength, but making sure like, is that pelvis staying straight like it's supposed to, or is it rotating? And let's correct those compensations. When you're doing a squat or even just a sit to stand from a chair, are you shifting to your stronger side or are you staying to the center? Because if we don't clean up these compensations post surgery, it's going to create other issues down the road.
Oh my gosh, yeah. This is why I think it's so great to have a trainer or a PT or both. You've got eyes on you. And I'm saying I'm guessing both of you guys when you first meet folks, I mean I know Brie, you have to do it as part of insurance evaluations. You got to watch the whole movement. I'm guessing Sue, you're doing that too when you onboard people, you're watching to see how they're moving, looking to see for any specific issues, correct?
Sure. Yeah.
And that's something, I've had people do a lot of online different group programs and different programs where the trainer doesn't see them. They just give them plans. And I'm like, oh, wait, we need to see how you're moving at least a little bit. Like it doesn't have to be every week, but like at least every month or something. If things are okay, maybe every few months. But I see a lot of people paying for coaching where it's just like they get PDFs every so often and no one's watching the
Mhm.
motion and have I done that with folks? Sure, if I knew that they were moving good and they were pretty athletic, yeah, but like folks that aren't. And so this is why, for the podcast I'm really wanting folks to hear, like, you want someone to have eyes on you. That's And I'm guessing both of you have all been nodding, so I guess we're all on the same page there. No, what other things, I'm going to put that out to you guys here. What other things do you think would be important for folks to be paying attention to, either as we're getting older, like certain things that maybe certain folks wouldn't have thought about, or little things you've caught? I just want to hear like little insider knowledge that you can think about, that's something to catch, something that I didn't ask about, something that people don't necessarily think about in terms of aging and joints, muscles, injuries, etc.
Well, I think what I hear the most is when somebody gets hurt, they can go into a fear place right away. They've watched their mother age or someone else in their family, and I no longer start with the physical part. I start talking them through, the fear. Tell me how you're feeling, because I can usually see it or sense it in them. Oh, I'm afraid this is never going to get better. I'm afraid this is the way it is. And I can really relate to that now after this experience I've had for the last 2 years. I understand the fear behind these injuries. What if it doesn't get better? So we talk through that first. Then there's the whole, are you willing to do the follow up? Sometimes you have to really convince your doctor that you need physical therapy. Unfortunately, they're not all just doling that out. Um, you have to do the follow up, get in there, do your eval. And then sometimes you have your homework. And are you following up and doing that? I ask them to bring me their papers, show me what they're getting assigned, see if I can help walk them through that sort of thing. So going solo at this when you're not familiar with with fitness or physical therapy is very challenging and it can be scary. So I try to meet them there.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, the fear is such a thing. I'm sure you see that too, Bree. What other things have you seen too? Like free fear and freeze and fawn? Couple things.
What
Fawn,
was it?
freeze, fear.
Fight
Uh,
or flight or freeze.
yeah, yeah. Like all of them though. Like I've heard people, when I'm starting to do more acupuncture now that I'm back in person here in Wisconsin. But yeah, you just see it where it's like, I don't know if this will ever change. But also when pain gets pretty bad, you start, and I've known this with myself with my disc herniation, I started to be afraid of certain motions and certain things where I'd go down in a squat and be like, "Oops, turning, nope, done, not gonna touch it." And so I would love to hear, like, maybe Bree, talk about how you talk folks through in PT, like talk them through the pain and here's the perfect question. What's good pain versus not good pain? I think that's a big one too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes right in like along with that what I call fear avoidance of avoiding those movements that hurt. Um it it's hard to know what's good pain, what's bad pain, that sort of thing. Um I think more of what happens is like we start getting pain. It's like, oh, it'll just go away. And we just kind of let it go and it never goes away. And then we just start, rather than going to get help for it, we just start avoiding those movements.
Mm-hmm.
And long term, what happens when we do that is the body learns this movement. We'll go with shoulder, we'll go with reaching overhead that should be normal, used to be normal. The body's now like, oh, that's not safe. So we're kind of, that's when we kind of get stuck in this pain cycle of, well, I've avoided it for so long. Now that I'm getting it back because I've gone to therapy or I am going to therapy or been working on my own or whatever, we're getting it back, but it still hurts because the body has now learned this is a bad movement. It's a dangerous movement. And so there's a lot of coaching and education that needs to be involved from with on the therapy side of things to help them understand, like, your body thinks this is a dangerous movement because you haven't done it for so long. It's an okay movement to do. If you go into that movement, it's painful, but you come off of it and it's gone. Most likely it's just the body just learning, like, it's it's trying to get used to that movement again. Now, is that always the case? Absolutely not. It is part of the process, though, that we do need to think about with a lot of our chronic pain, fear avoidance, that they're not necessarily bad movements to do. The body just has learned over time that's a dangerous movement.
A good point. That's a good point. I I was thinking about something as you were mentioning because of pain, right? And especially overhead. A lot of times, and Sue, I'm sure you have overhead motions, but I've noticed that a lot of workouts will avoid overhead. And I don't know if it's because of, and I'm talking about like canned workouts that'll show up like PDFs and things of that nature. But I didn't do overhead for a little while after I got done with my obsession with CrossFit. And then Bree was helping me because I was wanting to learn to do a handstand and a handstand walk. And I noticed like how weak I was in the shoulders because I hadn't been doing this as much. Like the most exercise I had in that department was lifting my suitcase in the overhead compartment, which, for a lot of people travel solo, ladies, this is an important deal. But I did notice I was avoiding that and it became a little bit harder. I also noticed for a lot of people, and maybe you guys can tell me if this happens to you, crunchiness in joints freaks people out a little bit. Things might sound a little like crackle pop, and they're like, oh God, I'm not doing that motion because I'm gonna hurt myself. So, do you guys have that? You both are laughing, so I'm hoping I'm not alone here.
Snap, crackle, pop.
There's
Yes.
a reason I have music on in the gym. It's not because I need music to work out, because I don't want to hear my knees every squat.
That's me too. Mine are like, and it's like I'm like, oh my gosh. And I've done like the fascial work, and I work around there and I'm like, why do I sound like saran wrap? I was like, all right, maybe it's sugar. Maybe I gotta cut down the sugar. So those of you out here who are having snap crackle poppies, you're not alone. It happens. Don't be afraid. But definitely, it's something I laugh at. I'm like, oh my God, snap crackle pop. Now let's talk about recovery for a minute, like workout recovery, PT recovery, because of course the two of you are working out, and Sue was just saying she was cruising in, getting a shower before this, because you were sweating. A lot of people are like, do I need to sweat? What's your guys' take? Do you feel better when you sweat? I sure do. I don't know about you all.
I personally love to sweat, but it doesn't determine whether I had a good workout or not.
Okay.
Same with muscle soreness. That doesn't dictate that my workout was good or anything like that. But I love to get outside and sweat. It's part of the reason I like Arizona. Uh, but with my workouts, it's more, um, yeah, it's more how I can walk out of there feeling better than when I walked in. That's what's really happening for me. My hips are a little rocking back and forth when I walk in. I can feel they're out of alignment and tight. I do exercises that honestly I personally wouldn't think I'd be able to do, but I'm trusting my physical therapist right now, and so I just do what they tell me to do, and I'm shocked. I'm shocked time and time again that I'm able to do this stuff without all that metal in there going, it doesn't come apart. It doesn't fall apart. Like it's building some kind of trust in my own body again that I had lost because it had, fractured a second time. And that building of trust, I know has nothing to do with sweat, but that's the important thing that I leave with there is like, all right, another time I got stronger, I'm walking taller, it's working.
Mhm. I love to hear that it's not all about sweat for you because I think a lot of people, let's face it, we're in the Jane Fondas and Richard Simmons days of like, sweating to the oldies and like if you're not sweating, you're not getting a workout. But I don't want folks to think that they've got to push that hard to do it. Some people sweat better than others. Granted, I do like a good sweat, but at the same time, I need to push a little harder to get that, and I don't do that all the time because then I burn myself out. But Bria, I'm curious to hear your kind of take on that, but also post-workout soreness, how long should it last? What do you do to counter it? And all those things, like what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Sue on the sweat part. Like, I'm not like I don't hate sweating. I can't like I don't necessarily love sweating. It's just kind of like I work out and it's a factor. It's like I know in the summer I'm going to sweat more than I am this time of year because it's 70 degrees warmer in the summer, and um, so it's just kind of like I don't necessarily need to sweat. It's just kind of like it's par for the course in the whole process of working out. Um, but as far as recovery goes, that post-workout soreness, it's going to be different person to person. Me personally, I've never been one who gets super sore with workouts. It's just not. Um, but every once in a while I will. Most people tend to. Typically that 24 to 48 hours is kind of that sweet spot where after that, that soreness should last. Sometimes it can last a little bit longer, just depending on the workout that you did. And I think too, like you need to understand and kind of feel out more than understand, but feel out the difference between muscle soreness and pain because they are completely different things and they can be a little tough to understand sometimes as far as like, is this just muscle soreness because I worked out or did I strain something? And I'll say just as a general, like typically if you strain something, if you put it in a stretch position, it's going to feel a little bit sharper of a pull than just a normal, like this really needs to be stretched right now. So it's just a very general, but it's kind of a way to start determining like did I strain a muscle or is this just soreness? Um, as far as recovery, hydration is huge, including electrolytes. We do need those as well. Protein is absolutely essential for recovery and just for muscle rebuilding after workouts, even just day-to-day life. Since our bodies need protein for or amino acids, at least for everything for building. So those are kind of the two big things is make sure we get enough protein so those muscles can rebuild after you beat them up and the hydration aspect of it.
Hydration is so like under talked about and like it's so undervalued. That's what I'm gonna say about that. It is something that I find so huge. And by the way, you have your Friday drink. Everyone took their sip. I love it right at the same time. Sue's got her water. You've got your sparkling, is it sparkling relight? Is that what that is?
Element.
Element. Okay. Too many electrolyte things. I've got my, well, we're down on the bottom there of my Ruobus, spicy Ruobus over here. Because I laughed when you said, it's 70 degrees in the winter over there. I'm like, we had 3 this morning. I'm
I mean,
like,
it's
70.
50 in the morning. If it was 50 this morning when I worked out.
That's pretty. I mean, in terms of what I imagine, it's kind of cold for Arizona, but
It
at
is cold for us.
the same respect, I know one of my clients had been there the other day and was like, "Yeah, it was cold." I was like, "Oh, sorry. I mean, 60 sounds great compared to -20. We had, like -22 like a couple weeks ago." I'm like, "It's a heat wave at 3. It's a heat wave." So there's that. There's that. Now, as we wrap up things, I would love to hear from you guys. Kind of like, what's your regimen to keep your body like going? Because you're talking electrolytes. Sue's got her water, but I would love to hear from you guys. Like, what do you do in terms of like non-negotiable, maybe vitamin supplements, maybe protein? What's kind of your things just to give folks a little scoop of like what you have come to value as support as you get older to help your body work better.
Yeah. So yeah, non-negotiables protein for sure. One thing I've come as when did I start this? Maybe 7, 8 years ago, I've started paying a lot more attention to my mobility. So my Thursdays is always my rest day from the gym, and it's always like 45 minutes of mobility work. And then at the gym, I'm always doing mobility work before I work out, depending on what the workout is. So if it's squat day, I'm doing more hips and ankles. If it's a pressing day, overhead day, I'm doing more shoulders, so or and upper back. So I'm always doing mobility based on what the workout is, based on just knowing I need to do that sort of thing. Supplement wise, like I said, protein, absolutely. I do creatine, I do L-glutamine, nighttime, L-theanine, and ashwagandha and magnesium, because that's huge for everyone. What else? I have my hormone stuff because, perimenopause. Trying
Mm-hmm.
to think what else like major do I do? Turmeric is a huge one.
Nice.
I've done that for a while. So those are probably the main ones as far as for from a, like as I've gotten older changes,
Makes sense.
additions.
Good. I like that plan. I like that plan. What about you, Sue? What is your keep the body healthy routine?
Well, I agree with Bree. Protein is so key, and the women I'm talking to that I'm training, they're not getting enough protein either. So as I'm sharing my story with them, I lost a lot of muscle, and my goal is to build it back. It's also to strengthen that bone. So my surgeon recommended bone broth, which I'd never heard of personally, and I thought that was fantastic. It's higher in protein and it has the collagen and all that. So that's part of my life now. I've always taken a multivitamin, so I've stuck with that. But I'm looking for, the different protein sources, and that I can add some of those things like turmeric or ginger or things like that. Anti-inflammatory, high protein, and really giving my body the fuel it needs to rebuild these muscles uh, the best that it can. I don't know that I'll ever be like the way I was before. I feel like I have a new body now, but I want it to be that strong, healthy body that I worked so hard for 20 years. And for me, that's muscle, 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 muscle.
I like that you say you have a new body now versus kind of hating on it, right? And I know you're into like to all of the positive vibe on that. And I think for a lot of folks too, as we get older, our bodies change. We do have to accept that there's gonna be changes, there's gonna be new things, and just rolling with what you got and you know, learning to love it every day. So I'm so glad that you guys could both come on and share your stories and kind of give us some scoops for, thoughts to be thinking about to keep the body healthy as we get older. Now, of course, you're both in Arizona, but I know Sue, you see folks all over, and I know Bree, you are you still doing any virtual stuff, or are you all in
Not
the office
anything.
these days?
I'm just in the office now.
Okay. So whoever wants to go first, let's tell folks where you guys are at and how they can find you and work with you guys.
Go
Go
ahead,
for it,
Bree.
Sue. Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
okay. Well, I work with clients all over the United States. It's a virtual personal training session. Um, Starts with that same evaluation that we talked about. Let me see some of your movement patterns. What are your goals? Um, it's really been interesting because I'm working with women, especially most over 50, who have been with me for many years. So they've just found that this is what works for me. I think that's where we really differ. You have a short-term relationship probably with your patients, and they maybe come back. Mine are twice a week, every week for some of them. We're just hitting our 20-year mark together.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So they're dedicated. I have a couple that are about to turn 80. They've been with me for a really long time. They credit strength training to the stuff they're still able to do, and I love that. But yeah, I can work with anyone in the country.
Training at 80.
Yeah.
How cool. I hope to be there. I hope to be there for sure.
And she's lifting weights, and we do a lot of balance, and we do a lot of core work, and uh, it means a lot to these women to have someone to come alongside them. They don't have to go to the gym. They don't have to do their hair. None of that stuff. Just from their spare room, wherever they are, for 30 minutes, we're gonna do strength training, but we also have the relationship. So, knowing someone's on your side to encourage you, there to answer questions, I think it's really helpful for women. We have this false belief that we're supposed to do it all on our own, but there are amazing practitioners out there that can help you if you need it, whether it's personal training, physical therapy, or other things. Get the help. Don't suffer.
So true. So true. True. Oh my gosh. Bree, where can they find you in Arizona? What's your like I'm sure there's someone listening that's like, wait, I need a PT.
Yeah, I am in Mesa, Arizona, specifically, so east side of Phoenix. Company I work for is called Modern Physical Therapy. I am the clinic director at my location. It's an awesome location, so you can attest to that. One thing I did want to mention too, along with that, came to mind as Sue was talking about her fear as far as doing different things in the clinic and kind of piggybacking on what Janine was asking me earlier that I had forgotten about. But when you're looking for whoever you're working with as a therapist, whether it's coming to see me or working somewhere else or going somewhere else, is building that trust with the client or with the patient, understanding those fears are there. Like a lot of times, not everyone comes in scared. Like if they just had a standard surgery or just kind of chronic pain, they're not as scared to do things. With Sue, like she had a pretty traumatic like injury with her surgery and then a second surgery because of it. Um, and we knew there, like, because of her precautions, there was risk of re-injury and all of that. So it's like I'm asking her, like, I want to add this today. Do you feel okay adding that? Because I'm not going to add it if it's going to freak her out. And so making sure you, with your therapist, you have that relationship or the therapist is working with you in that and not just like, all right, go do these things, I think is super important for the whole recovery process.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. Like having that safety, because I do hear from clients when I get feedback, from wherever they went to PT and they're like, yeah, I was told to do this thing, I tried to do it and, there wasn't communication, let's put it that way. And so having that communication, having that relationship, like my gosh, I haven't practiced 20 years yet. So I haven't seen anybody for 20 years too. So I'm like, gosh, how cool to be able to know folks that well, and understand them as well. Yeah, building relationships. That's ultimately what it's about, and finding a place that you feel or a practitioner that you feel comfortable with that you can work with is so important. That's
And
why I brought
safe.
you guys. And safe, yes, for that darn nervous system of yours. Um, it's Gosh, nervous system safety is so important. Oh, can't
Yeah.
speak enough. So, ladies, this is why I brought you on. Wanted you to share a little bit, bring some insights. I have no doubt that we'll come up with other topics in the future. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. And I'll put how to find you in our podcast notes at drjkrausnd.com. Thanks again.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
It was fun.
Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.